This is Mike Reinhardt, by the way, folks. So,
Nice to meet you.
Hi, Mike.
yeah, absolutely. Mike was my boss on the Halo project at Microsoft. He is been a colleague of mine for a long time when I worked as lead dev for Lips for Xbox at Microsoft Game Studios. Mike was over there as the lead dev for Gears of War. He's got scads and scads of experience in Microsoft technologies, and he has been my boss, colleague. I've hired him to consult for me before. Mike is here so that we can handle the real questions, okay? These are the serious questions about sexism and sexual harassment in the workplace. What is the real impact of the behaviors that we've been talking about all day long, and how do you avoid them, and what really goes through the mind of the guy? It's gonna be a man who's gonna be giving you your technical interview, okay? What really goes through his brain when he's interviewing with you, okay? And we're going to reenact some of the real interviews we've done. One interview for which, not his fault, I didn't get hired for. One interview for which he did hire me for the position, okay? So you're gonna see not just what in theory works, but what has actually worked and not worked in real life stuff where there was, like, you know, money on the line, okay? So I'm gonna let Mike take it over for a bit, and he's gonna give you some comments and tell you his thoughts on the subject, and absolutely, so Mike, take it away.
Okay. So I'm going to keep this pretty casual, because if you can keep an interview casual, it's actually a very good thing, right? And I've just taken some notes here so I can make sure I stay on topic. So if I'm glancing at those, that's what you're going to see me doing here. But I'm going to start with what a typical interview format is. Many of you have probably been on technical interviews before. Some of you have not. In a technical interview, though, oddly enough, there are a lot of common themes that run through them that are there almost exclusively in all of them. You know, and usually they're going to start with the same thing that most interviews start with, which is they're going to ask you some questions about your experience, your background, you know, what you have done, what you haven't done. Even though you've provided them a resume, no matter how much material is on that resume, they're still going to ask you questions. They're going to ask you questions that are on the resume. They're going to ask you things like, what is something from your past history that you're very proud of having done, right? And then you're going to need to come up with an answer for something like that. And it's not a big deal if you have to think about it, but if you know something like that, it's much, much better. They're going to ask you things like, what is something that has gone wrong in the past that if you had it to do over again, you would do in a better way? And you know, they're going to ask questions like that. That's pretty common of even non-technical interviews, right? Any interviews. But in a technical interview, you're going to get a very clear set of defined questions that come after that are pretty common. One of them is, obviously, they're going to ask you technical questions that have nothing to do with exactly with coding, but they'll be algorithmic. They'll ask you something about, you know, how are you going to solve this problem, so that you can go through, and depending on what level you're at, you may have more or less of these kind of questions and more or less of the coding types of questions, where they're just going to ask you how to design a solution. Right? And then, of course, following that, they're usually going to ask you to take some piece of that you can do in a 15 or 20 minute time frame, and they're going to ask you to code that up. And that's fairly common. And then it's also very common for them to ask you a logic question, which has nothing to do with anything you would probably ever code, but it's more just they want to see how you think through that process, how well you do in that process, and you know, do you panic, how do you think through it, things like that. That's what they really want to know. And so that format is fairly consistent, right? And then, of course, they're going to follow up at the very end by allowing you to ask them questions about anything that you want to know about the job, right? Okay, so that's the format. So in that format, there's some very important things. First, let's start about prep. Before you start an interview, and you're going to go into an interview, very important thing, obviously, is to study up on the things that you know. If it says on your resume, I'm an expert in C++, you better be an expert in C++.
Or he'll ask you and you won't know the answer.
That's
CSS
right.
writing problems.
Or they will blast you, right? So I don't know how many people I've ever seen. This is just a very typical thing. If you say you're an expert in something, you better be an expert in that thing, right? Sure. Go ahead.
Listing a language, does that immediately mean you're an expert?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
You can say I've had 10 years of experience in a language, and they're not necessarily going to assume you're an expert. You might have spent, you know, 15 minutes every week for 10 years working on a language, and the rest of your time is C#. But a lot of times it's common in your resume to say what your level of expertise is on things, and if you don't, they're going to ask you.
You guys remember earlier we said that it's the same thing that Bill was talking about, where you give yourself levels. I'm, you know, 5 stars in CSS, whatever. Exactly. So you're rating yourself.
Yeah, and that's pretty common. But they will, if you say you're an expert, or you say you're 5-star, or you say something, whatever that is, right, that says that you're great at something, they're going to drill you on that if they're good at it. If they're not, they're going to find something they are that you say you are, and they're going to grill you on that, right? So, you could try and fake your way through that, but I do not recommend it, right? And at the same time, you do want to be very, very confident about the things that you are an expert in, right? Because that's where you're going to shine in the interview, right? So don't be wishy-washy. Make sure you know the syntax and the things that you say you're an expert in, or don't say you're an expert on anything if you're not. If you're a generalist and you can pick up things really quickly, say that, and that's fine. Then nobody's going to grill you. Yeah, that's fairly common, right? And know the terminology as well of fields that you say you're an expert in. So forget about just a language. If you're an expert in Agile, then you better know the terminology of Agile, right? Anything that you say you're an expert in, any technology, anything that you are, you want to make sure you're good at.
You say you're an expert in Agile, and someone says, "What's the last rundown chart you did?" And you go, "Huh?
Yeah.
Not a good idea."
No, it won't work well that way, right? Also, study what you need to know for the particular interview you're going for, right? So if you're interviewing for a web dev position, don't go study massive amounts of C++ and SQL, right? Because that's probably not the main thing they're going to grill you on. They're going to grill you on, HTML5 and JavaScript, right? That's the kind of stuff they're going to interview you on. So make sure you target your prep for what you're interviewing for, right? That's very important. If you're going for a back-end development job, then yeah, you want to study, prep on the heaviest areas you're going to study on are going to be on the SQL and on the C++ and whatever it is that they work in that company.
Do you guys understand what he means by front end and back end? Does anybody not know what that means?
Okay, I'll answer you, right? So front-end developers tend to do more of the look and feel of the website, the interaction, things like that. If you're working on a website, if you're working on an application, they would be doing like whatever that might be, and it might be in Silverlight. Right, the behavior, the look and feel, the interaction. It's the things that the user is actually going to interact and deal with, right? Whereas the back end, they're the guys who write the services, who those applications or those websites deal with in the back, and they will, handle all of the stuff that happens on the server, so the interactions that go back to the server and then come back. So that's front end, back end. A lot of times there are people who will do the whole thing in a small business. In big businesses, there tends to be a lot more separation. So there are people who are really drill down and they just do front end, and there are people who just do back end. And and you tend to have a lot bigger architectures, and you need that. You need specialists. So it's pretty important to know what kind of job you're going for and study in a way that makes sense for that. And if you don't know, ask. Find someone who does that job, ask them what they work on. And if they're something totally you're not into, you might want to steer toward a different interview, right? Because that might not be the right job for you if it's something you haven't had the experience in yet. The next thing to do to make sure you do is study the company that you're interviewing for. Know what they do, know what their product is, especially the area that you're interviewing in, right? So you want to make sure that if I'm going to work for Microsoft's Windows Phone 7, you better go look at the Windows Phone 7, and figure out what features it has, what features it doesn't, what complaints people are making about it. Know a little bit. You don't have to know everything, but at least know a little bit. If you have a Windows Phone 7, great. You're gonna have some things to talk to them about. If you don't know anything coming in cold, they're gonna be wondering why you're doing this job. If you're just there for money, that's kind of it's going to apply negatively towards you, right? That's like, oh, well, this person's just here to get a job. They don't actually care about this technology or the working here.
Are you hearing a common theme in what we said earlier? If you want a job as an Android developer, you better have something on the market, right? This is exactly what Mike's talking about here.
Sure.
If you've got work, if you want to work in a field, you better have worked in the field, even if it's not on your resume yet.
Or at least have experience in that or interest in it, right? Have some reason why when you go to that interview, they're like, okay, I see why this person is going to want to stick around. Right? Because a lot of times they may have 3, 4, 5 candidates that are great that they can pick from, and they're going to pick the one that they think is going to grow the best in that situation. And the person that's going to grow the best is going to be someone who's really interested and motivated, right? So that's an important thing. And then another thing that's really important is practice, right? So interviewing is a skill, and it is not a lot like the skill of doing the job, unfortunately, in many cases, right? There are certain jobs where if you do the job, you can go interview and do just fine. You can do that in this if you have a lot of experience, but you're going to be basically interviewing far lower than what your actual skill is at the job. Interviewing is a skill set in and of itself. If you practice interviewing, you will get good at it. right? So the format that I've just given you with the interview, do those things. Have somebody give you a mock interview, somebody that knows what they're doing, somebody that's done interviewing before. Have them give you an interview. And even if they don't know it, give them the piece of paper and have them read it to you. Whiteboard coding. Practice whiteboard coding. Start by practicing all the kinds of strange academic algorithms that you think might be asked, all these algorithmic problems that you would never actually need to do in a real world scenario. But they ask these things over and over and over again on an interview, like reverse a linked list, right? When have you ever in your job had to reverse a linked list? Never, right? But yet you get asked this question repeatedly in interviews, so practice it, right? And don't memorize it. It's not, don't memorize the solution to a problem, because I will tell you this right now, if you go up to a whiteboard and you just write out the answer, they know that you have picked that up from somewhere. They don't know if you solved it yourself or if you pulled it off the web, but they know that you did not just solve that right there in front of them, right? Practice the skill of solving these algorithms, not solving an individual algorithm. There are people I know who know people who have gone out and memorized all these algorithms and how to solve them, and they've flown through interviews and they can't do the job, right? So you do definitely want to practice the skill of solving the algorithm, and that interviewer wants to see you do that. Sure, go ahead.
Where would you get some samples to even know what kind of algorithm you're talking about?
On the interwebs. There's lots of them out there. So
Microsoft sample questions, Amazon, remember what she said earlier, Amazon sample questions, interview questions, algorithm questions.
Sure. And also just about anything you can pull from academia, right? So anything that they're going to put on a computer science exam is something that is fair game, right? Because they're interviewing people that have been through computer science courses, they expect them to know these things, right? So, you know, they might ask you to write some kind of search algorithm for something. They might, or not like a complex search algorithm, but or do something very simple, right? Or do a sort, or reverse a linked list, or something that we're going to ask a little bit later, which I'll just prep right now, and the secret's out of the bag. Reverse the words in a string, something simple, right? That you can do, but in 10 or 15 minutes. But it's enough for them to see what your skill set is in development. And so those are the kinds of questions they're going to ask. So practice that. And then when you're done practicing doing those on your computer, do them on a whiteboard, right? Because it's a completely different thing. You don't have IntelliSense or anything like that to tell you that you're coding it correctly, right?
So tip 2 on those kinds of questions. Here's an interesting one, and one that I got hit with once, which is, well, you can reverse the linked list in C#, but you say here you've got 15 years in Java. Do it in Java now.
Yeah.
So, and right after that, so you've got 6 years in Bash, huh? Do it in Bash now. That was a brutal interview, which, by the way, I did not pick a Java for. So now y'all know, and you have no excuse for not doing it yourself. Sarah has spoken.
Okay, so now you've prepped for the interview. It's time you actually go on this interview, right? So once you're in the interview, a couple of important things, right? Don't panic. Don't ever panic. Panic will never, ever, ever help you, right? And I know it's easy to say don't panic. It's hard not to panic. So there's a couple of things you can do. I'm going to pull this from my sister's a psychologist. I'm going to pull a few things from the world of psychology, right, that can help you here. If you start to panic, control your breathing. It starts with take 4 seconds to breathe in. Hold for 4 seconds. Breathe out for 4 seconds. Hold out for 4 seconds. Breathe in for 4 seconds. You can make that as long as it takes to make it work. Everyone try it. Just try it right now. Try breathe in for 4 seconds. Hold your breath for 4 seconds. Breathe out for 4 seconds. Hold for 4 seconds. You can see how that controls your heart rate, starts to calm you down. There's some other things you can do too. If you're standing or sitting, you can take your toes and curl them.
Oh, I love that one.
Just curl your toes. Try it. Put your feet flat on the floor and curl your toes. This is a instinct of babies, right? And what it does is it grounds and centers you, right? So there are a couple of things you can do. If you start to panic, just find a way to calm yourself down. And there's lots of techniques that you can do, but those are just a couple you can use for calming yourself down, right? Because panic will not help you in any way in an interview, because then they assume you're going to panic in any situation in real life when you get into a stressful situation. So that's part of the interview as well, right? Do not argue with the interviewer.
I think you're wrong about that, Mike.
You're not getting this job. So you can disagree. And if you know you're right, and you know they're wrong, stick to your guns.
Yes.
But-
Because they're finding out if they can push you off your right.
Absolutely. And I've had people do this before. They will tell me something, oh, you know, that's not right. This is how it is. And I know they're wrong. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. But if you argue with them, if you're like, no, you're stupid, right? That is not the right attitude to have at all, right? But you can say, no, I'm pretty sure I'm right on that. You know, I can go look it up. You know, hey, I don't have a perfect memory, but I've done this a lot, and I'm quite certain that is the correct answer.
And hey,
You
if
know.
I'm wrong, don't hire me, but if I'm right, you need to hire me now. Turn it into humor, just like I did just now. You laughed, right? Use the humor.
Absolutely. Keep that casual, right? But do not argue with them. Do not get hostile with them. Do not confront them. It could be, and I've also had this happen, where you are right and they are wrong, and they are in the same position as you, interviewing you to do the same position they're doing. And now, if they hire you, if you get confrontational with them and do this thing, or even if you really, really push it, you're telling this person, hey, guess who's going to get the better score next time when we get reviews, right? So you want to be careful not to be too bullish. Now, don't get me wrong, you want to be confident about your skill set, and you want to do really well in the interview. You can tank yourself by going the other way. But if you want to get confrontational, argumentative, and call this person out for not knowing what he's talking about or she's talking about, bad idea. Okay, so you've gone through that. There's one final thing that you want to do if you're in an interview that's just an interpersonal relation thing, which is let them teach you. If they know something and you didn't know it, these people love to teach, right? They want to show you all this stuff they know, right? And if you take notes and interact with them on what they're teaching, and further along, oh, I understand that, so you would do this. Oh, okay, I get where you're going with that. This would allow you to do this.
Here's an example that I remember from what I was doing back then. It seems like it applies here. Does it apply here? Exactly.
Right. So, I mean, let them teach you. Do not cut them off. Do not say, oh, I get that, right? You know, if they want to teach, let them teach, right? A, you're going to learn something, right? So that's good. And B, they're going to come out with a positive outcome of that interview because you're a pleasant person that they know they can teach. If they can teach you, you can learn, and you can show them you can learn. That's a valid skill as well,
Yes.
right? You don't have to know everything going into a job. I don't think I've ever started a job where I knew everything I needed to know for that job. That's never happened. And I've been in the field now for over 16 years. And I have never started a job where I knew everything I needed to know. You're always going to learn at the job. So knowing that you can learn is an important skill that they have. And that you learn gracefully. And that you listen. Right? That's an important thing to know. Okay, so if you've completed your interview, what do you want to do after the interview? As again I was saying before, ask about the job like you're interested in the job. Like you really want to do that job. So she brought up dating reference. If you go out on a date with somebody and you never ask them a single question about themselves, they're probably going to think you don't really care that much about it. Right? What is your point there? If you go to a job interview and you don't ask any questions about, you know, what's the cafeteria like? You know, what is your work-life balance? You know, how, you personally, what is your work-life balance? What do you guys do on-call rotation?
Let me go ride their bikes to work here.
These kind of questions, right? Because this is, what is it going to be like for my life when I'm working there? And if you care about that, then they know you care about that. Then they know you're serious, as opposed to, I'm just here to see if I can get a job and make some money.
Ooh, Mike, hang on for 1 second. Let me grab that microphone. Remember we had the list of questions that you don't answer. Child care, benefits, salary, things like that. Those are not the questions we're talking about. We're talking about the culture of the company here. Bikes and not telecommuting, but you know, how do people get to work here, and what is it like here? You know, what's the last day that you worked a 14-hour shift or something along those lines? Elicit information about the culture of the company, but never about what you can get out of them, if that makes sense. Okay?
Yeah, that's for the recruiter. Right?
Yes.
The recruiter will answer those
Or
kind of
HR.
questions. You
Yeah.
do not want to be throwing those kind of questions at somebody you're interviewing with, you know, because they don't want to talk about their salary or things like that, right? Okay. So, so interesting questions, not just technical. You can ask technical questions too if you want, right? Those are always good as well, but definitely interesting questions. And then finally, follow up with the recruiter. If you don't hear back in a week, that doesn't mean you didn't get the job. That may mean they're very busy. Call the recruiter and ask them what's going on. They'll tell you. You know, I've had interviews where I didn't hear back from the recruiter. A week later, I call them. Oh yeah, they want to schedule you for. You know, I did a phone interview. They want to schedule you for another phone interview. You know, it was good news, but just didn't get back to me. So make sure you follow up. Yes.
Speaking of recruiter versus direct application preference.
There's almost always a recruiter involved somewhere. If you do direct application at a big business,
Like Amazon.
There's definitely going to be a recruiter involved.
Okay, you just don't know that that's a recruiter.
It could be a recruiter. We're also going to have that section tomorrow on
Oh.
recruiters.
Okay.
And we're going to go really deeply into depth on that. But yeah, in a situation like Mike's talking about, where especially where you're going to be working on contract, always going to be a recruiter.
Oh.
That's the person you're going to be following up with.
If you're on contract or vendor, the vendor agency is your recruiter,
Usually
right? There's
that's
a recruiter for that. That's all they do, is they recruit you for the job and get you in a position and maybe manage you while you're there, being that they make sure you get your paycheck and your benefits and all that, right?
Okay.
If you're doing full-time position, excuse me, there's almost always a recruiter. Occasionally it's hidden from you that that's a recruiter, but they almost always tell you they're a recruiter. So that's really common.
I heard that after an interview, it's good practice to send an email like right after to just say thank you for the interview.
I like doing that.
Yeah, it can be. It depends on the situation. If you're not in direct communication with the person, then you can't always do that. But if you are, then that's something you can do. In most cases, you are not in direct communication with that person. You have their phone number or something like that. You don't have their email. And the recruiter will separate you from that intentionally because they don't want you to harass the people that interviewed you, right?
It happens.
But yeah, if you have their email, it's fine to send one email saying thank you, and that's it, right?
Right.
No more.
Not hope to follow up, just I had a great experience with you guys today. The most you can say is I look forward to hearing from you.
Right.
That's it.
Should you ask for a business card or should they
No.
offer it?
If you're in an in-person interview,
Yeah.
it's a little different if you're interviewing for a small business than if you're interviewing for someone like Microsoft or Amazon. If you're interviewing with someone like Microsoft or Amazon, you're going to interview with a lot of people who are intentionally want to be separated from the rest of the interview process. Their job is to say that your technical skills are this, right? Or you're a good fit for the team, right? That's it. That's their job. Their job is not to manage the communication. That I hope you'll hear from you soon is not a good thing to say with an interviewer that you're someone that you're interviewing with, an interview, because they're not going to communicate with you. The recruiter's going to communicate with you, or the HR person's going to communicate with you. You're not going to get any communication from that person, right? Now, if you're with a small business and they don't have a recruiter, it's a little different. They may be playing the role of the recruiter. So you have to do a little bit of, and that's asking those questions, right? So you need to ask the questions of, well, what is your role in this, right? If you don't know, if it's not clear. But if you go for a big company, the people interviewing you, they're engineers. You're interviewing for an engineer position, they let the engineers interview you, right? This is not a recruiter. This is not a person who is going to contact you. It's their job to write the code or build the electronics or whatever they do, right? They're engineers, right? Troubleshoot the problems in the phone network, right? They're engineers. So why would they contact you, right? So I'm saying, hey, I hope to hear from you soon. They might be like, why do you hope to hear from me soon? I'm married, so they don't know what you're asking that question for. But if you're in a small business and this is the person that's taking you from end to end, then absolutely that may work, right? If they're the person who recruited you, they're the person who's interviewing you, they're the CTO of the company, and it's a small company, okay, that makes sense, right? But yeah, usually it's the recruiter that you'll have that kind of feedback. All right, so we're going to start off with something that we brought up before. Tell me something that you worked on that you're very proud of.
That I'm very proud of. I would have to say that I had a challenge earlier on in my career. I was hired on at a company that I won't name right now to ensure that a set of code that was not created by me, wasn't in fact created by two generations of the coders in front of me, was handled, was delivered on time, and I was jumping onto this program or this entire project as the only person there qualified to tie all the bits and pieces together and deliver a final project. I was handed a mess, and I have to say the fact that I managed to deliver that code 10 days early and publish the site that was needed with a week's worth of extra time is bar none the biggest success I've ever had in my career, and I'm still not entirely sure how I did it.
So is that something you think you could repeat?
I think that I'm a problem solver, is what I think. So I didn't know what to do when I first got handed that unbelievable mess of code. To dig more deeply into it, what I did was I developed some relationships with the people that were around me, some of whom had hands on that code before but had been moved to other projects. And there was some acrimony about the project, so and the way that it had gotten taken away from some folks. So I'm particularly proud of the fact that some of my soft skills let me develop relationships with people who knew where everything was. And as a result, I got to consult with people that maybe somebody who wasn't looking outward as well as inward would, I don't know that they would have had those resources. So I'm particularly happy about the fact that I managed to elicit information from people who have no reason to help me with something like this. And honestly, their assistance is the reason why I got it set up. But I think in future, if something like this happened again, I would try to reach out to the people who had had hands-on code before. And if that didn't work, that's what we look for. Or being.
Yes, be very careful where you work and which terminology you use. Do not interview at Microsoft and say, I Googled it.
We said this earlier, he's not joking.
I'm not joking.
Yes.
Do not pull out your iPhone at your Microsoft interview, right? Most people, they don't care. They might have one too. But you never know, right? This might be a very bad thing. Yes?
How long can an answer be? I mean, can an viewer wander away if
Sure.
our answer is too long?
Absolutely. So you want to make sure that you keep your answers succinct but complete, right? And if you take, because again, that's part of a skill, right? You're going to communicate when you're in these positions, so they want to know how well you communicate. I think that it's hard to say which is more important, being succinct or being complete, but it just depends on how far you go, right? If you're really incomplete in your answer, that's not going to be good. If you're really verbose in your answer, that's not going to be good because your whole interview is going to be answering one thing and they're not going to know how good you are at other things, right? So you have to play the balance on that.
Onion. There's a top-level statement that I made, then a mid-level statement that I explained a little bit further. Then I dug down further even than that. And as he was nodding and encouraging me to go on, I kept talking. And when his face stopped and he started getting tired of listening to me talk, I wrapped it up.
Yeah, and you do, I mean, this is interpersonal skills that you have to learn
The
is to
first,
win.
the first statement you heard me say was, I took this giant mess of code and I delivered it 10 days early, okay? You heard numbers come out of my face, but that's the first thing that happened, was I said exactly what the situation was, then I dug a little deeper.
And if you hit that point, give a brief pause, because they might cut you off, and that's enough,
Sure.
right? They might be like, that's good.
That'll do.
Go ahead.
I just really liked how you went. You started at you and went out and came back. Included everybody else. Like just hearing you say that, like I was pretty inspired. I wanted to hire you. I haven't heard anybody talk in such an eloquent way as far as I did this and I collaborated and they helped me.
First-
And I was very thankful.
First, I appreciate it. Thank you, Eric. Second, do not think that that is the first time that I've ever given that answer.
I know, but it felt good to hear, like listen to you say it. Like it was very, I mean, I could see what you were doing, but it still felt good to hear.
It should. So Mike has heard me give the answer to that question before, I'm pretty sure.
Yep.
You've heard me
Yep,
give exactly,
absolutely.
I think that was the same exact answer, because that's the thing that I say every time, because it sounds awesome, right? And I've got practice saying it.
And it's true.
And everything I said was dead true.
And she's proud of it, so why would she answer any differently?
Kidding
right?
me? That was one of the awesomest things I've ever done in my entire life. And oh my God, that was some ugly ass code. Oh, it was horrific. And we're not gonna say anything more about it. I'm pretty sure I would get sued.
So the second part of the mock interview was going to be, tell me something you worked on that if you could do over, you would do better, but she answered that as well with the first question, so the interviewer's going to move on.
Yes, because I know he's gonna ask that question next. It is more my job to control where this is going than it is his job to ask me questions. It is my job, if possible, to anticipate. I know if he asks me something that you're proud of, the next thing that's gonna come out of his mouth is the binary. What's the binary?
What aren't you proud of?
Yes.
What's-
What's the binary? On everything, yes. Answer that question within your question, okay?
Okay. All right. So, well, with that, we're going to get straight to a coding question.
Okay, sounds good.
Right. It says on your resume that you have some experience in C#.
Quite a bit.
We do some C# coding here, so
Okay.
why don't you write for me a function that will reverse the words in a string?
Okay.
And that's it. Go ahead.
Okay, so first of all, what you want me to do is reverse the words in a string. Is that any sentence? Do you want to give me the sentence?
So we can certainly give you some examples.
Sure.
But this should be a generic that can do any sentence. So sentencing, any kind of sentence like a cat in a hat.
Fair
Right?
enough.
And you want to reverse that.
Okay, you said write a function. Do you want a function or the full class?
Just a function.
Just the function itself? Okay, well then I'll throw it together. Alrighty, so where did my...
As she's writing, notice something important that she did. And go ahead, and
Yeah,
I'll
absolutely. Well, I'm gonna have to tell Ben some of the stuff I'm gonna do here too, so
Sure.
pause, go ahead.
she asks questions. That's important, right?
I repeated the question back to him phrased slightly differently.
Yeah, it's very important to get a really good idea of what the question really means, and there are actually more questions that could be asked here too. So she'll go on here and we'll see.
And the class and function thing is just by itself, because I can write the entire class, and I might do that. I might just note and to hold my place, and I'll show you just this little trick as I'm doing it. But I didn't just repeat back his question phrased slightly differently. What I did was I did that, and then I made sure to ask an intelligent question about what he was asking me to do so that I was sure that I knew what was going on. Yes, so time back on again. Okay, so let me go through this step by step, and I'll make sure that I've got it down exactly able to solve the problem, and then I'll throw the code itself. Okay, so let's see here. All right, everybody watch what I'm doing. Do you see a line 1/3 of the way across right here? And another line about 1/3 of the way up here. So now for the third time. So what you want me to do is reverse a string of words in C#, right?
Yes.
Okay, so reverse a string of words in C#. So yes, right?
That's correct.
All right, did you see me get fourth verbal confirmation that that is actually what he wants me to do? Do that thing, okay? Because he may look at that, and this may be the time where your nerves and adrenaline have taken over, and this isn't actually what he wants you to do.
That will happen. You'll go down a path that is completely different, and you'll get to the end of it having done it perfectly the way you thought you were supposed to do it, and then you'll go, well, that's great, but that's not what I asked you to do.
Okay, so to do this function, it sounds to me like we're probably going to need to basically do two different things, right? You're going to need to create the string that's going to need to be reversed and feed it somewhere, and probably create the method itself that's going to do the string reversing, print out the line, right? Something along those lines. Okay, fair enough. So we'll start first of all with creating the sentence. So let's go ahead and have one set up here where we create a string. Okay, so I'm going to create it here, and then I'm going to feed to the function that's going to reverse it. And then here, I think I'm going to print it out so that you can actually see what happens. Okay. So create string first of all. So next of all, the method's actually going to do the reversing. Let's see here. So here's going to be some reverse. Okay. First thing that needs to happen is I need to pull the string in. So
Notice an important thing that she's doing here is she's actually writing out the steps of how she solves this problem. She isn't just going straight to code.
pseudocoding.
I've had people give me interview questions before that were so simple that I wrote the code out, just I'm done, right? And they did not like it. I did not get the job. And I was like, but it was so easy. And they're like, well, you should at your level be able to write out the algorithm first of what's going to solve this problem. Be able to ask me these questions. So don't get thrown if it's too simple of a question. Still follow the procedure, still follow the process.
And the reason for that, we'll show you part of the reason to follow the process in a bit too, because he may ask me at the end of this, and I don't know if he will or not, to change one single thing about what's going on up here and show the slight change in the code over here, just to see if I know what I'm talking about or if I'm just spitting out code onto the whiteboard that I don't know anything about, really.
Yeah, we didn't practice this, so she doesn't really know what I'm going to do.
No, I actually told him, ask me, right here, I told him, ask me a question that I may not know the answer to at the end of this. Scott, or to help him know the answer, please. Okay, so reverse it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull a string into this one right here. I'm going to reverse it. Probably I'm going to, this is going to be a string of words. I think I'm going to reverse, basically reverse the tokens. So here, let me see, go back a little bit, pull string, and then actually under here I'm going to tokenize. So, yeah, so I'm not, so reversing the tokens, right. And then here, I'm going to return it, I think. So this is going to be the reverse, and it's going to take the string itself, where this up here is just doing it. Okay. Does this look like it's going to solve this problem up here to you?
Sounds like a good start, and I'll tell you what, you don't have to worry about feeding it in. Just go ahead and write the function, and we'll assume that we'll write other code that'll feed
Simply,
it in.
okay,
Just
so
write the function.
you don't even need me to do this, just assume that I can pull the string in here
Yep.
and then do it any way I want to?
Yep.
Okay, even though I've got this really witty string that's stuck up in my head, right?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Well, you can write this. You can write the string for a test later, but
Oh, absolutely.
just go ahead and
Okay. So this is going to solve the problem, but you only want me really to write this portion of it right here.
That's
essentially,
correct.
Right? Okay. So no need to, this would be the class, but there's no need to do it. So essentially assume that up here is going to be my import statements. Assume that here is going to be the main that's going to run this create string and then feed it and pull it back. So here,
Okay, I'm gonna let you work on that. I'll be back in just a little bit.
All right, cool. Can you grab
This-
some coffee while you're up?
This happens all the time, by the way. He'll turn and start working on what he's doing while you're writing up on the whiteboard. This
Yeah.
happens all the time.
Grab
Not
some
always,
coffee.
but it will happen.
Oh, piece of gum?
They won't leave the room,
Not so much.
but they will turn around and work on their computer, right?
All right, so this is going to take a string, so I am thinking this bad boy needs to be a public. So it can be accessible, static, since it's not going to change, static. It's going to take a string, so public static string. It's going to take a string, string sentence. The sentence is going to be what we're going to pull in. Okay, curly brackets. All right, you see what I just did? This down here, add the curly bracket down here. You can always move it later, but you don't want to leave it off, all right? Okay, so public static string, string sentence. All right, so first of all, I want to pull it in, and I said I was going to tokenize it here, so we're going to create a string array, I would say. Not constant, okay, so string. You are an array, not just a straight string. We're going to call you words is equal to sentence. Now that we've pulled it in, sentence. And in C#, I've got a couple of helper methods that are going to be available to me through the API, and this one is going to be split. I'm going to split this apart at white space, so single quotes, one quote. Go, semicolon.
So I'm gonna stop her for a
Right.
second.
Yep.
If you're on the whiteboard and you're doing this, I don't know what this is. It's actually a space,
You said I opened my face and heard me say single quotes for white space,
right?
right? I said that, so he might stop me and ask me, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so what I usually do is write an underscore there, even though it's not an underscore, and I say this is a space.
Wait, why couldn't you just like do a double line and then just put it in as a comment underneath?
You can do things like that.
You could.
But when you're whiteboard coding, you're not necessarily, so there's two things that are a factor when you're whiteboard
It's a
coding.
good question, by the way.
One is time, which it takes time to write all this stuff up on there. If you were typing it, it might be much quicker. And two is space. You're gonna run out of space on your whiteboard and have to erase it and start over, and you don't wanna run into that problem. So you wanna keep things as short as possible. Keep your variable names short. They don't care. Keep your, and you may say that, say I'm whiteboard coding, so I'm gonna keep my variable names short, and normally I would, use a variable that makes more sense here, like blah. Use your words instead of writing it up on the board, because it's gonna take a lot more time, and you do not want to run out of time in the middle of an interview doing a simple interview problem, right? That doesn't bode well for you.
That's happened to me.
And they may or may not realize that it's because you wrote 15 character variable names and repeated that 14 times throughout your function, right? But you don't want to make that kind of a mistake. So yes, what you're saying will work in code, fine, but on the board, it's better to use your words and say, this is a space, or draw an underscore there and say, this is a space.
Yeah, this is a space right here. So you have the freedom to do stuff that is not ASCII related. So yes, here is some white space right here. So the splitting apart of the words, essentially. So this is going to be the tokenization of the sentence here.
But while she's doing this, I'm going to reflect on something you said. It is good to comment on things that you're not doing on the whiteboard that you would do in real life.
Yes.
Like I would comment this, because this is an unusual piece of code. This is not obvious if you're reading the code, so I would put a comment here, or I would put a null check here, but I'm not going to do it because there's no room on the whiteboard. I don't want to run out of space. I would do error handling, things like that. You can tell them, and then if they want you to do it later, you can do it later. You can draw a line right here and say, this is right where I would put error handling. If you want, I can write that later, but I might run out of space.
And actually, and this is something I realized just now that I screwed up at, and so I'm going to ask you, hey, by the way, just now that I remember this as I'm in the middle of this, I can always throw a try-catch in here if you want to, if it gets passed on a sentence. Do you care about that right now, or just assume
Well,
that I checked
let's
it?
not worry about that right now.
Okay.
We'll do that in a little bit.
All right, so now we get to use another helper method. So I'm going to, and this is right out of the API, I'm going to array dot reverse. This is just going to reverse everything in the string array of words. Okay. All right, that's going to erase, and good. And now I'm going to return it. So return, let's see here, return string. Good, and next helper method is just to stick it all back together again. So we've got string join. And string join is going to get joined back together again, but I want to make sure that there's space in between words, so we add the string character space in there, which is this guy right here. So there's space in here. Okay, and comment a variable, which is words. Okay, and feeding that guy in there. And looks like there's a little extra space right here. Okay, so we have the method static returns the string right here. Down here, we've got the string array that tokenizes words by splitting up the sentence, reverses it, and returns the string joined with white space and words here. So does this look like it answers your question up here by creating this?
Mostly.
method?
Now, can you write now? I told you you didn't have to do this, but I'm going to change my mind. Can you write the method that calls this?
Sure, absolutely.
So just write the line of code that will call this method.
The line of code that will call this method here. Okay, so just the line of code is going to call this method. Assume that I've got a main method right up here and that I fed it. So the line you're asking for is this feed right here.
That's correct.
So the feed right here is going to be, oh, you know what? Thank you for catching
Bingo.
this.
See, she got something there.
Exactly. So
No name of the
here,
function, right?
I don't have a name for my method here. That's awesome.
Interviewers will do that. They're like teachers. They want you to find your own mistakes.
Oops. Yeah, so how about I call this reversed words? All right? So there we go. So up here.
That's actually good. That's all I wanted you to find there. I'm pretty sure
Okay,
you can
fair
write
enough.
that.
So reverse words and then call the string up there.
Okay, so let me ask you a few follow-up questions on this method here.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Question? Absolutely.
When a moment like that happens, that's not necessarily a negative thing, right? You're showing that you can actually.
Sure. You forgot to write something on a whiteboard.
It happens.
Yeah.
It will never compile, so that would never be a problem that would actually happen in the real world. If you are perfect, again, about if you just like, as quickly as she wrote this up here, I'd almost think that she practiced this, right? It's getting that point, but now she made a mistake. If she practiced it, she missed something, right? But she thought it through, she gave me all the algorithms, she did all the stuff, so she did everything to know that I would know that, okay, she's thinking through this on the spot, right? And she made a mistake.
But it looks like I am, right?
The fact that you asked her the question means, and she knew how to begin it, and then that connected the dots, so you know that she knows what she's talking about.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, so if I had just said, well, and interviews are all different. Some interviewers are going to be like, oh, you forgot the name of your function there, right? That's all they're going to do, right? And they're not all the same. But most of them, they like to teach. They really do. Remember that, let them teach you. So they will let you catch your own mistakes. So then I will say, okay, why don't you write a string up there that we're going to test this with?
Okay. Let's see here. Do you want?
And by the way, if you're going for an SDET interview, it will always be code and test. If you're going for a dev interview, 50-50. Right, they may not ask you to write your own unit tests, they may.
Okay, do you want the full function up here that's going to call this down here, or do you just
No,
want the line
I
of
just
code?
want a string.
Just a
Just write me a
string?
string you're going to use to test this.
Okay, let's see here. It says C#, so we're going to get const.
Well, it doesn't even have to be in code. I mean, just an example. An
Okay.
example string you would test this with.
Okay, so, well, string S equals, dev, best, the is Tarah, there we go.
Okay.
Console dot write line, just the usual output, and that's gonna be S. And expected result is Tarah is the best dev.
You know how you call that function?
What's that?
So.
Yeah.
Oh
So-
yeah, the line in here is the line he was asking right here, which is, okay, you want me to add a line in the
You
middle?
need to actually call the
I'm
function.
gonna call it in the middle, okay, so, alright, I thought he was just asking, do the string and then display it, but, okay, yeah, so the line in the middle is gonna be, what do we do? Okay, const string S, so this up here is gonna be string, const, also, string S1 equals, reverse words feed S into it. And now, it's actually the console write line S1.
And that won't compile. Can you tell me why?
Alright,
See, they're going to do things like this too. I'll get you in little
let's
things.
see.
This is a good example. If you don't know the answer or you're panicking, let them teach you.
Exactly. So we've got the constant, the string S. Here is my string. It's getting fed in here. My string. Here's S1. Reverse words, and S is the string that's getting
So you can see it's not occurring to her. At this point, he's going to get to the point of starting to teach her.
S line. So this is going to feed this. Here it's going to return. Join back up. Printing
This one here.
Yeah, so I'll give you there's nothing wrong with any of the code that you wrote as far as examples. The only problem is that when you do a const, reverse words is a function. You cannot have a function at the end of a const in C#. It won't let you do that.
Okay,
So a constant has to be literally a constant. It cannot be a method call.
Okay.
So
Here we go.
Let
There's
them
a
teach.
variable instead of the constant, so just getting rid of that.
there you go. Okay.
Cool.
Yes.
Is there a time limit that she has, like internally, does the interviewer think, I'm gonna give her 15 minutes, I'm gonna
Absolutely.
give her 5 minutes?
Absolutely. The difficulty level of the problem will usually be the time limit. Sometimes they'll give you one that's too big. I have been asked problems that were way too big. They were like the kind of stuff that would take you a month to do. And they gave it to me in an interview, and they knew I was never going to finish it, but they wanted to see how far I would get and how well I would do.
Did they ever tell you how long
No,
you have
absolutely
no
never.
idea, you just have to start?
I won't say never. Rarely.
Okay,
Occasionally they will say, I'm going to give you 15 minutes to do this, but that is so rare.
okay.
They just want to see what your thought process is. They don't even know how long it's going to take for sure. They do know roughly, this is a problem that they can do in a half hour. This is a problem that is going to take them a month, and there's no way they're going to be able to do it. Let's just see how they do. And I got that problem, admittedly, because the interviewer gave me simple problems, and I went, are you actually going to challenge me? Well, they did.
Here, looking at it real quick. If the interviewer stops you halfway through what you're doing here and says, okay, good, we're going to move on from there, don't get flustered by that. They will stop you halfway through a lot of what you're saying and what you're talking about, and that's often going to be, that can be good and that can be bad, but don't panic about what that is right then. Just ignore it and move on. Be cool, let it roll off your back, okay? So, and the reason for that is it could be good because it means they're like, I'm not going to bother to go to the end of this. There's no reason to. I see she knows enough about what she's talking about. Time to move to the next thing. Or it could be, I'm not really going to dig into this because I'm bored. I'm tired. I haven't had my burrito yet today, and so we're just moving on to the next one here. I don't really want to go into the details of what's wrong with this, and I just want to see if she can hit 80% of the correct answers on the rest of the stuff that I've got.
Yeah,
So it's okay.
The sister question to don't panic is don't get flustered. Right? Getting flustered doesn't help you either, right? So.
And when you were asked that major question, knowing that it was extended amount of time,
Yeah.
you're still going through the process of doing your
Absolutely.
algorithm?
Yeah, because that's about all I had time for, was to do
Right.
the algorithm. There's
Right.
no way I was going to code that up, right? And I've been asked a design problem that was so complicated that they asked me to code one of 7 pieces that I came up with in my design. Right? It's like, okay, I do this step, this step, this step, this step, right? These are all the pieces you need to code. These are how they're going to feed each other. And this part, they'll say code that. Yes.
Is it more important to get the pseudo part right and the thinking process right than the code?
In most cases.
Okay, that's very
Depends on what they're
interesting.
hiring you for.
If they are hiring you for a 3-month job where you are going to do nothing but code monkey for 10 hours a day, that's more important.
Okay.
If they are hiring you because they need you to solve problems, this is more important. And 80% of the time, you're being hired to solve problems. You're a
Yeah.
developer. You're not going to really be a coder. Code monkey is the pejorative term basically for somebody who just sits there and does this all day long and doesn't need to think. They're being told to execute on something rather than coming up with the answers to problems.
There's no official levels
No.
throughout the industry, but there is, I'll get to you in just a second, there are kind of terms that people use, right? There's hackers. Those are the guys that they're script kiddies, whatever you want to call them, right? That all they do is they try to break things. They're not, they do not write. Some of them are very good, but they are not engineers, right?
John Callis did a webinar for us earlier. The guy that worked
Yeah.
with Schneier, I swear to God. Yeah.
So
he gave them the definition of hacker, so shout out to him. He did
tremendously talented, but they're not an engineer. Their job is not to write code that's reusable, that is going to be able to you're going to be able to build on it. That's not their job, right? And then up from that you have coders, right? And coders know the language. Think about those as, those are the people that can, if you gave them a book, they could copy it out, right? They could type it out, right? They know how to take an algorithm and turn it into your code, right? You've already designed it all for them. Then you have developers, and developers know how to design solutions that work, and there are many levels in development, right? That's a broad band. And then you have architects. Architects don't usually touch code anymore. They're above that. They've done that for many years. They tell you how to write your code, right? So, if you're being hired as a coder, where are you at in that spectrum? If you're being hired in a position as a coder, you better show me you know how to code. If you're being hired as a developer, then you know how to develop. And, if you make a mistake here or there, they're usually going to let that go. So, but it depends. There have been contrary examples.
So we've got 20 minutes left in the session, and we probably want to jump into the questions about the actual nitty-gritty of male-female relationships in
Okay.
coding and
Can you
technology.
get her question?
Yeah, sorry.
I had like programming whiteboard question. How likely are you to get asked to draw diagrams, like tree diagrams or?
You can definitely, very likely. So if you're drawing, so one of the
XML.
yeah,
XML.
if it really depends on what the question is. If it fits for the question, you may be able to draw whatever you want. If she went through the steps of this,
Yeah.
I'll give you a perfect example. One of the questions that I ask a lot to junior developers when they come in is reverse a linked list. And if I ask you to reverse a linked list, then you know, you're going to want to draw out your linked list, and you're going to say, here it is in stage 1, here it is in stage 2. Here it is in stage 3, just a 3-item linked list so that you can see your algorithm works. Usually 3 to 5 is enough to know that an algorithm works, 3 to 5 elements, right? And, you know, and this can get, by the way, a lot more complicated because the next question usually in this interview is, okay, what happens if I had a space here? Now I have 2 spaces. What if I had a period at the end? And then now she didn't ask the right question of what do I do with punctuation? What do I do with 2 spaces? What do I do, right? So then he brings that out at the end, right? She brings that out at the end.
Yeah, because there's no.
More or less. So that's the whole point of what we're talking about.
Yeah, so it can get a lot more complicated, and then maybe you might have to do some things. It just really depends on what the solution is you can ask. It's very common to have to draw diagrams. Yes?
One thing that I've always done when I'm in these interviews is when I'm finished coding, I step back and I look at it and I say, like, verbally, like 2 things. Could I make this more efficient? And could I eliminate external storage? And just hearing those 2 words, I feel like that always impresses the interviewer that I'm thinking about them, and it gives me time to think about if my solution is too rudimentary or.
If you don't, they'll usually ask you. Right? They're going to ask you, okay, now how, you know, in almost every problem I've ever been asked in an interview, it starts off with something fairly simple, and then they say, okay, now, you know, you brute forced it, which is what I say at first, I'm brute forcing it, right? And then they say, well, now how could you optimize that? So what's big O notation? You must know big O notation. If you do not know big O notation, you're going to want to learn big O notation because that is frequently asked. It is, if you've done computer science programming, you've done it. But they're going to ask you, what is the big O notation of this function, right? So it's a little more challenging when you're writing in C#. If you're writing in C++, it's a little easier because what's the big O notation of split? Does anybody know?
Never heard of big O.
N?
Right. Well, it's n, right? But you have to know this, right? What's the big O notation of join? So when you're doing these, you're using functions under the cover. You have to know the big O notation of the functions under the cover so that you can get the big O notation of the larger. I was actually asked a question on an interview once about doing an algorithm for. This was just a phone interview. He asked me to do an algorithm for how you would split something up that was like 1 trillion. How would you sort 1 trillion words in an array? And so I was like, okay, well, not on a single machine. And I said, so, you know what, and I won't say what company it was for, but let's just say they had a cloud solution. And they said, so, you know, well, you have our cloud solution at your beck and call. And I said, okay, well, then I wrote this algorithm for how to break it up. And he said, what's the big O notation of that? And I said, well, that's meaningless. You're breaking it up. Why do you care what, you want to know the big O notation on each machine? You want to know the big O notation of the whole thing? And I said, the only thing it would be useful for is if you wanted to know what the entire computational cost of that was across your cloud. That's what he wanted to know. And so I gave him that, right? So yeah, these questions can get very complex. We don't have enough time here to get into the complexity level of all of them. So, right.
Right, we do need to move on to basically what is the nitty gritty of some of the stuff that Mike and I need to talk about. He and I have had long alcohol-fueled conversations about the nature of men and women working together in technology, okay? This is a question that Mike has asked me in an interview that I got hired for the job for, okay? So he and I know how to work really well together. And we've had these discussions before, and I think a lot of what you guys are learning today has originated in a lot of ways from conversations Mike and I had a couple of years ago, honestly, about the way that women interview. So, Mike, what was I wearing in the first interview that I ever had with you?
Answer that.
Do your best.
I don't recall.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about for Halo?
Probably something very similar to this. You were dressed in something that was it was business attire, not overly fancy, but and I don't remember the exact outfit. But now let me tell you this right now: if she walked in dressed in something outrageous, I would have remembered. Right?
Exactly. I didn't actually feed him the answers to this question. If you want to know the truth, he doesn't remember.
I don't remember.
Yeah, that means I did right. doing it right. Okay, R-I-T-E, right. Don't have them remember anything about what you're wearing.
Absolutely. If the guys go out talking to their friends afterwards about the interview, and what they want to talk about is what you were wearing, that is not good. And yeah, not good.
So
That's not good for you.
Yeah. What's the most common mistake that women make in technical interviews in terms of their gender, Mike?
Okay, that's an interesting question. And she didn't prep me for this either.
No.
So
I just want to know, this is the same conversations we've had before, which is, I'm like, dude, women suck at this kind of stuff, because how do they project themselves as confident to you? So,
in truth, the largest problem that I've seen, the women that I've worked with and that I've worked with to help through interview processes, it is far more common, from what I've seen, for women to get flustered, panicked, and almost even have to the point of having a panic attack during an interview. It's very common for them to feel put upon that this is unfair, and they aren't getting any different interview than what a guy is getting. But there just is this, and it's not, everyone does not have that problem, but it's just I have seen this experience a lot, where they will not perform at their best. There are women who I have known for a long time who are extremely good at development, they're extremely good at test, and yet I will give them even a mock interview where I'm giving them the interview, and they crash. They can't answer a problem I know they can do.
what exactly do they do? I mean, you're talking about the kind of the freak out, immediately they like panic.
They get stuck. They'll sit at the whiteboard, and don't get me wrong, guys do this too, but I've seen it more often in women than men, and I'm not sure why. I cannot tell you the psychological reason for this. They'll get stuck. They'll be sitting here on the whiteboard, stuck. They'll know they can solve this problem, so they won't ask for help, but they're stuck, and they don't know how to get to the next step.
Can you ask for help? Is it okay to ask for help if you're stuck?
Better
Well,
to ask for help than not get the job done.
If you were in the situation of the interviewer, and the interviewee was stuck, would it be better, you think, for them to ask you for help?
Yeah.
Or for them to just stand there at the whiteboard with a thing up there not knowing what to do? Right?
Yeah.
So, is it good for you to need to ask for help? No. Is it better to ask for help than to be stuck? No. Right?
Or yes,
So-
it's better to ask
yes,
for
it's
help.
better to ask for help than to be stuck, right? Is it, it depends on how long. If you're stuck for 30 seconds, fine, you're stuck for 30 seconds. If you say, I need some time to think about this, that's fine. If you're really stuck and your brain is doing a spin and it isn't going anywhere, then, you know, I'm really stuck here, can I have another problem, or can you give me a small hint? It's better than being stuck for 5 minutes, not getting anywhere, right?
Hey Mike, give me 3 words off the top of your head that you would use as adjectives to describe my physical presence while I'm at a whiteboard here. Just 3 words that pop into your head for how I comport myself, adjective.
So she was certainly confident, right? She was composed, and succinct is a good one, right? She was right through from beginning to end, very succinct all the way through, right? And those are all very good things to have.
Confident, composed, succinct. Do not think that this is my first rodeo. This is a set of skills that you don't get born with, all right? We're teaching you guys these things not so that we can sit up here and say we're awesome, you know, marvel at the awesome, marvel at the awesomeness of me. But this is a set of skills that we are in the process of teaching you. Okay, so we're showing you these things so that you can do them. We're giving you this practice. You're going to get your mock interview video back later on so you can do your own self-critique and say to yourself, here's 30 or 40 things right now that I now know that I'm never going to do again in a job interview. I'm going to fix this thing about myself. I'm never going to wear that shirt again. You know, oh my God, I didn't know that my skirt was going to do that when I sat down or whatever, right?
Let me tell you one thing about an interview which I told a long time back when she was my girlfriend at the time who I was helping get through interview processes. You can get a job as a woman in a way that a man cannot. You can flirt your way through an interview, and it may work.
May work.
And then you just got yourself a job flirting. You did not get yourself a job as a developer, because that is what's going to be expected of you the entire time you're there, because that's what you did in the interview, right?
To quote Top Gun here, you may be writing checks your body doesn't want cash.
Exactly. So you do not want to do that. You want to get the job because you're the right person for the job, not because that guy is so turned on by you that he wants to hire you. That is bad, right? And, you know, it's not worth it to get the job. No matter how well you think you can do at the job, it is not worth it to go through that technique.
Nerds, introverts. These are guys who have the same set of interests that you do, but sometimes they're staring and going, dude, it's a girl. I've never seen one in a technical interview position before. Just as you've never seen a woman interviewing you for a technical position before, you may be the first woman this guy's ever interviewed for a technical position. Okay? So, and Eric, don't think that we're singling out, you as being the only one, but you're seeing here that everything we're saying here, even if we're appending the word woman in front of it, still applies to you. You see the need for the confidence and stuff that you and I talked a little bit about this at lunch. So everything that I'm doing here, you're still needing to replicate. There is no gendered approach to what I'm doing here. Confident, succinct, right? Composed. These are the things that everybody needs to be, regardless of gender, all right? And everybody can learn them, all right? Again, not my first rodeo. I have done this again and again and again and again, and that is why I'm good at it. I did not get born reversing strings. Okay?
And how you dress makes a difference to a man too, right? I mean, if you, and you can go too far. If you go to a Microsoft interview in a suit, a lot of times that's it, you're done.
Yeah, that's what we said, no suits.
You want to dress right for the position. So remember I said learn about the industry? Go down and sit on the campus and watch what people dress like, right? If they dress in t-shirts and shorts, you don't necessarily go to an interview there. You usually go a little above the way you would dress for the job, right? So this is not how I dress at work, but this is how I would dress if I was going to go for an interview, right? I would wear either a button-up shirt or a polo shirt.
What are your sleeves right now?
They're rolled up.
Yep. Why are their sleeves rolled up?
He's working.
So yeah, it's a little bit more casual, but yes.
The question you asked, are you actually going to challenge me? That sounds to me like a very guy question. It doesn't strike me as a female question.
I've so asked that question before.
That is a arrogant question.
That is an arrogant ass question, is what it is, and you will be correct.
Women have asked that question, men have asked that question.
Have you ladies ever heard these words before? Imposter syndrome. Anybody? Ever? Okay. Imposter syndrome happens everywhere, and it happens for all women. And imposter syndrome is the belief that you are not as good as you are at something. Okay? So,
Can I add something here?
just start it off,
Okay.
dude, because this is the big one. This is
So
the
this-
big number one reason why women don't get these jobs.
So she's going to say why this happens to women, and I'm not an expert on this, but I can tell you it happens to other people too. I was in a position once where I had just come back from being a martial arts instructor. I was new to the field. The entire area had changed. And I'm working as a developer, and I'm used to working where they say work as many hours as you want, and we'll pay you all the overtime you want, and as long as you're getting work done, we don't care. And all of a sudden, I'm getting pressured. You will work 40 a week, and the manager keeps calling me in his office saying you're not getting enough work done. And I'm shocked. I'm used to being a rock star. I'm like, what's going on? Why am I doing this? And I, for 2 weeks, I was down and depressed and didn't understand why I couldn't do my job. And I was sitting in a room of contractors. There were about 7 of us in this room. And at one point, I stood up and I said, is anyone getting their work done? And everyone said, no. And I said, are the managers telling all of you you're not getting enough work done? Yes. Oh, I get it. It's a management technique. It's not real. It's perceived. And this is what she's getting at, right? For women, it's a
little different, but yeah.
more perceived than it is. This can happen to anyone. But women have been told this over and over and over again a lot in society, that they're not as good at the men at math, that they're not as good at the men at science, that they're not as good at the men in technology. And so you start to believe it after a while. And it's bull, right? If you are, you are. If you're not, you're not. So, yeah, okay.
Why do I have the audacity to stand up here and tell you that I am better than you at coding?
You've been doing it longer.
Okay, why else?
Does he believe it?
Thank you. Confidence is not something you put on like a suit. You believe it. You stand up in the morning, you stare yourself in the face and go, I am so awesome. I mean, because I am, actually. I'm joking again and again and again. And you hear the humor in my voice, and it is intended to be a joke. But at the same time, there's this tiny little thread, and you may not be able to hear it, but a tiny, tiny little thread, saffron-sized thread at the bottom of my voice. Shut up, Alan. I know. That's this little tiny bit of me, maybe even looking for a little affirmation. Maybe just this. And I'm never going to admit this, and you're bleeping this out. Seriously, man. I'm never admitting this in public.
I'm not even recording.
All right. But you have to believe it, okay? I have gotten into positions, and the joke here is fake it till you make it, right? You get into the position and you do it by saying, I'm badass. I'm good at what I do. You never ever walk into a job interview and say, I'm okay. The big difference and the reason that imposter syndrome has so much of an impact on women is, we've said this again and again and again, but when women go into an interview, what they often do is say, I'm pretty good at this. I mean, I think that there's people that are better than me, but if Mike asks me the question, why are you the best person for the job? You guys know that's a trick question, right? So why are you the best person for the job? Ask me out loud.
Why are you the best person for this job?
Well, I don't know who else you've been interviewing with, but I gotta tell you, I've got 10 years of experience doing this position. I have spent years learning how to optimize code. I've got 6 certifications in C#. I have 2 certifications in Agile and Scrum development, and I've got a code library that I would challenge any of the other applicants to match, honestly. So did you hear me use a lot of numbers in there? A lot of numbers in there, all right? And the reason why is people believe numbers. Any of you guys Terry Goodkin fans? Do you know the Wizard's First Rule series, the Sword of Truth, the Seeker of Truth, the series they had on that? Okay, so I'm a giant nerd. So it's a doorstop fantasy novel is what it is. And the Wizard's First Rule is the first novel in the series. And the Wizard's First Rule is this: in the absence of any other information, people believe what they are told. Okay? When you use a lot of numbers in a response like this, what you're doing is you're creating a sense, a feel of authenticity. The understanding that you have given a specific answer. I didn't actually give him, I never answered the question. I never said why I was the best person for the job. I just cited a whole lot of facts at him. He's gonna come away from that question believing that I answered it, but I didn't.
The real question is, why do you believe you're the best person for this job?
Yes.
Because you don't know you're the best person for that job.
Trick
you
question.
can't know that. You've not been the one interviewing everyone else for the job.
Trick question, but you get it every single time. Why are you the best person for the job? Okay, so what is it really like working with a female all the time? I actually, in the team that Mike was bossing me around on, although he so didn't boss me around that much because I don't take much more. So there was actually, believe it or not, another woman developer on that team. Stunned me, absolutely stunned me. So what's the difference? I've never actually asked you this question. What's the difference in bossing around women and men? Was there anything with us?
There's not really any. There's obviously there are things that you
Don't say.
There are things that you cannot say to a woman jokingly that you can say to a man jokingly.
Like what?
Anything that would be construed as sexual harassment, right? You cannot, and yet you can say it to a man and they're not going to feel sexually harassed, right? So,
Like?
I don't know if I want to get on tape to say something.
No, give them an example of something that if they hear it, they know it's bad. Seriously, swear to God. Any example of any kind.
I can't say get your butt back over there and do that work.
Yeah, that's a good example.
I can't say that.
Yeah.
I can say that to a
Get your
man.
ass
He
in
doesn't
here.
care. Right?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Get your ass in here. If you're not at work.
I can't say that. I could get fired for that.
You're
right?
referring to
So-
a physical part of that person. You can say that to a guy and it's not gonna matter. So,
No.
but he couldn't say that to me, and he doesn't actually. But one of the reasons he and I work together again and again is because we compartmentalize a lot. You're gonna make friends with these people.
Sure.
They're gonna become your colleagues and your friends in a lot of ways. Mike and I met on the job, okay? And so you need to be able to compartmentalize what you do and what you do not do. I have been known to cuss like an Irish longshoreman, as I have mentioned before. Mike and I regularly bitch each other out, okay? He really is one of my best friends. On that job, he never said one single word that could ever be construed as any degree of familiarity beyond that which he shared with the other people on that team, okay? We walk in the door and instantly curtain drops, all right? That level of compartmentalization is another thing that I'm talking about when I said earlier that you're gonna switch positions with people over the course of your lifetime. The colleagues that you have on your teams will one day become your subordinates, your bosses, your friends, the people that you know forever. And maintain a habit of developing a difference between your work life and your friends, okay? Mike never once said anything that could remotely be construed as inappropriate while he was my boss, okay? Ever. And he's
On the
an
job.
extremely inappropriate person. In so many ways, you are just wrong.
Yes, she's right.
But this is the kind of compartmentalization that you need to be able to do, and it helps in gender relations as well, okay? So does anybody have any questions about what it might be like, or are you afraid of anything? Are you worried? I mean, we're telling you all these horror stories and everything like that, but I wouldn't be doing this if I wasn't making sick cash and having a great time.
So before those questions, I did have one thing to add. It's been sitting in my head here for a while, and I want to get this in. One of the things that I mentioned about inappropriately dressing for an interview, and that you could flirt your way through an interview. The other thing you can do is sabotage yourself. So someone that you're interviewing for, whether they be male or female, if they know their crew well, and they know who's working for them, and they know it's a bunch of nerds that don't have girlfriends, and you come in dressed in something that is going to completely distract their team every time you come to work, they're not going to hire you. Because
You weren't a good fit
you are
for the team
going
at
to
this time.
destroy the productivity of that team. And they're actually logically not going to hire you, and it's not sexism. It's unfortunately the
You did it.
sexism of all the guys that are already working there, right? So that's another reason to dress appropriately for the job. They need to know that you can dress appropriately for the job and not distract everyone that's going to be there.
Yeah. And
Depends on who works there.
And that is a fair thing, okay? That is a fair thing. You need to show that you can dress appropriately for the team. You're showing that you understand the culture that you're walking into.
That could happen as a man too. If you
It
walk
can.
in a holy pair of shorts that you're indecent in, you're not going to get the job.
Or the,
right?
the epic t-shirt with the inappropriate stuff on it all the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that one, dudes do that all the time.
F the police is not going to get you a job. My roommate wears nothing but t-shirts and shorts to interviews because that's how he dresses for the job.
And he's good enough, it doesn't
He's
matter.
good enough, he can get away with it. But
You can make
they're
your own rules
appropriate
eventually.
t-shirts. If he's going to go to Halo, he'll wear a Halo t-shirt,
Yeah.
right?
Dude, he's so the guy that wears the t-shirt of the band he's gonna go see.
Exactly.
I was just thinking that. I'm like, I wouldn't hire him. He's the guy that wears the t-shirt for the band.
I totally didn't wear a Halo
You can get away
t-shirt
with
underneath my outfit when I went to go interview.
When my martial arts instructors come into town and they're teaching me you're supposed to dress nicely when you go in there, I can wear a t-shirt if it has their logo on it. Right?
Okay, so
That's
what
considered fine.
What are you scared of? I saw a dozen hands in here. So tell me what you're scared of in these situations. What do you want to know? I need a question.
Oh, well, I did. We can go in order if we want, but well, I guess my question was related to I think Liz brought it up earlier. I don't remember who. The difficult questions that women have in the workplace, like who are you supposed to talk to about breastfeeding? Like, can you
HR.
HR.
HR?
And
No,
we're going to cover that in Women on the Job tomorrow
Okay.
morning too. There's going to be a lot of in-depth
I
stuff on
just
that.
feel like there are things that women behave differently in the workplace, and because the workplace is so male dominated, it's not set up for women. And so, have women ever had
Oddly
difficult
enough, HR is
conversations?
almost entirely made up of women.
Yes.
That's so funny.
And that's because it's
So-
non-technical and it's lower skilled, which is one of the reasons. I'm nothing against HR here.
No.
I swear to God, oh my God, I just screwed myself in every job ever from now on. But HR is women get tracked into HR because it's lower skilled and social. Seeing what's
So, have you had women
help.
on your team that, I don't know, their child is sick, and they
Absolutely.
and they have to, and
I've
they
had men
have
on the
that-
team that their child is sick and they had to go.
Okay. So
I had
they
somebody that was
have-
on a conference call the other day where we were having outages,
Yeah.
and the guy that was on the phone is like, I have to pick up my son, I'm leaving.
Okay.
Why would that not be okay for a woman and okay for a guy? Of course it's okay, right?
Okay.
I mean,
Well, you got to remember something else too. I wouldn't be friends with Mike, and he wouldn't be here talking to you if he was sexist.
Yeah.
So there's kind of a problem here, which is you really want to ask that question of a guy who would have a different answer than he has for
Yeah.
you right now. which
I'm
is sort of a problem.
inappropriate to all sexes, so.
Basically, yes, exactly. So you wouldn't care if you were.
I guess the bigger question is it okay for women to do that, or do we have to be careful or afraid or worried about
It says okay for
it in
anybody to do
general?
that, honestly.
Okay.
But
He
you
has
do not want to
experienced
get
the difference.
into the stereotype that you're constantly doing it. There's a difference between there's an emergency and there's an emergency every week.
Okay.
And so if you get into the stereotype, and if there's a guy who's sexist who's your manager, and he's like, oh, there she goes again, right? This is a problem.
That guy.
You want to manage the perception,
Yeah.
not necessarily the reality, unless the reality matches the perception. In which case, you have to figure out a way to
I
solve that
get
problem.
that. It's just more like, can we not ask? Can we not have the conversations? Can we not bring
Well,
anything
of course you
in?
can.
Okay.
And especially if you're working for a big company, HR will protect you if you feel you're being discriminated against for those reasons.
They can't protect you against not getting promoted.
That they
though.
cannot, yes.
Okay.
So, all right, and we're gonna talk more about that on job
Okay.
thing. Okay, so more questions. Why are you scared to work with dudes?
It's just such an unknown nebulous. I mean, I did a tour. I had a friend who works at PopCap, and we went out for lunch, and I had the fortune of walking through and getting introduced to people in different departments, and it happened to be Geek Olympics, or Company Olympics, so they were playing, like foam darts in the different cafeterias and that sort of thing. It was great to see that, and there was a part of me that was just, I have to say for a millisecond, not because I don't love coding, but there was a part of me that was like, wow, this is such a different culture, because I'm not a gamer.
Yeah. Men never grow up.
What's that?
Men never grow up.
Nerds
We're
never
always
grow up.
kids.
Yeah, there's so many great opportunities out there, and it's just, I really think it's great to put myself outside of my comfort zone. I really believe in that. But at the same time, it's like you want to be a good fit for that group too.
Sure.
And so I don't even know if it's a question. I mean, I think maybe it's just an opportunity to.
Are you asking the question of, do I have to be like all of them to get along?
No, I'm not really sure what the question is actually. I think it's just more getting comfortable with, because basically going into the unknown. I mean, we're coming right out of, well, for me and some of the other students coming out of the community, we're getting our certificates or our degrees, et cetera, and we're applying for these different jobs and not having any familiarity with these cultures or this specific. So it's just I wouldn't say I'm not terrified, nervous, but there's some companies that are known to have
more problems than others.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We can ask you more questions one-on-one and get real answers to your questions over.
Thank you to our Kickstarter backers, Michelle Thigpen, Annabelle Richard, Tech Liminal, and Adria Richards. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank all of our Kickstarter backers. We couldn't have done this without you. Thank you.